is MC Fireside Chats, a weekly show featuring conversations with thought leaders, entrepreneurs, and outdoor hospitality experts who share their insights to help your business succeed. Hosted by Brian Searl, the founder and CEO of Insider Perks, empowered by insights from Modern Campground, the most innovative news source in the industry.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of MC Fireside Chats. My name is Brian Searl with Insider Perks. Super excited to be here for our last episode of this year of this group of people. Is that enough of a tongue twister? But we just came back with from a whole bunch of conferences, and so I have all kinds of things we can talk about there if we get bored on the show. Also, during the intro, guys, and I didn't say this before when we were backstage, I just decided when it said the host is Brian Searl, that's not enough. I think my 2024 goal is to make a clone of me in AI that's like a good, bad version of me that sits on the shoulder, right? Like the devil and the angel. And then it can just argue with me on the show when I say something ridiculous. It can correct me automatically. I think that'd be interesting. Maybe not. I don't know. Mike left. He just left. He was like, no, I'm out.
He hated that idea. Well, I almost did too, but
it was really strong. That's a really strong reaction from Mike. I don't know.
He just bailed.
Yeah, he didn't say no, you're wrong. I don't want to see that. He just boom, disconnected. So hopefully Mike will be back. But welcome for our recurring panelists here. Scott Bahr from Cairn Consulting. Super excited to have him. It's his second time on our show as a recurring guest. So we're going to do all kinds of amazing research reports for Modern Campground. We delayed that until January because I was too busy and Scott was too busy, and we want to make sure we roll it out right. So super excited to do that in 2024. Casey Cochran from Campspot, as always, and maybe I don't know, somebody should call Mike and make sure he's okay. Maybe I really offended him and he's not going to come back. I don't know. Anyway, but so what do we got, gentlemen? I know we want to talk about a little bit about KOA's research report. Well, Casey, let's give us. Scott wasn't at any, right? Scott's too busy and too important in his. Do you have a private jet, Scott? Now that you just don't travel to the conferences, and he's a bigwig, so he didn't go to any conferences. I'm kidding, Scott. We'd love to see you though. But Casey, what was your take on some of the conference? You went to one conference, right? Ojai?
Yeah, I went to Ojai, and then I went to the Yogi Symposium. And so, yeah, I mean, I think Ojai was good. It was a lot of vendors, and they had some good panelists. We did a speaking session on kind of some of the differences between hotels and campgrounds, and some of the things to kind of pay attention to. Obviously, a lot of hotel people coming into the space, and rightfully so. And what are some of the lookouts and some of the kind of key differences in terms of the way we look at campground inventory versus hotel industry. So that went well. And then overall, it's a good opportunity for us to meet with partners and meet with people that we're working with, and even some prospective buyers, and kind of show them who we are and what we do and where we are in the industry. The Yogi Symposium was great. That was a lot of fun. A lot of cool things going on there. And then the rest of my team, I think I was gone 3 out of 4 weeks in November. So I've gifted some of the other shows to much more willing and able bodies than myself in my old age. So they were glad to get out and do some traveling.
I mean, I wish I could do that. I don't know why people want to see me at these shows. It makes no sense to me. I'm not interesting at all. I have nothing to say. I'm going to send Scott. Will you go next week for me, or next year for me, to all the shows?
No,
man badge. It'll be fine.
I purposely stayed away from a lot of them. Just what Casey was just talking about. It gets, the month of November is so jam packed, and you obviously know, Brian, because you were at all of them. So
almost. I didn't get to Picoa. Almost.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Almost all of them, and they asked me to come, but it was literally I would have had to hop a plane and go there. But yeah, it was really interesting to see all the different conferences and stuff like that. I'm really getting nervous, the more we go, that I really did make Mike upset, but maybe he just lost his internet connection.
She's backstage there.
Oh, Sandy's back here, but she won't turn on her camera. Sandy's here with us. She supposedly, and I say supposedly because we don't really know, she says she has a stomach virus and that she doesn't want to be on camera. And I want to believe you, Sandy, but in the age of AI, like, you could be anybody. Like, you could.
That's true.
No,
So-
that's
That
Sandy.
is
No one's
absolutely
replicating that voice that well yet.
Fair point, perhaps. But yeah, so it was really interesting to go to conferences, and I want to hear. I think I want to hear from. Well, Sandy, you went to conferences too, so give us your take on some of the conferences first, and then we'll pivot.
Well, I thought everybody was doing a really good job this year. I thought some were more interesting than others. So definitely the RVIC conference with them becoming Ojai was a big surprise to a lot of people and created a lot of buzz. So that was interesting. I thought it was really great having Paul Bambi on the podcast. So that was kind of interesting that we got to actually have him on with us. So yeah, I think for me, one of the most interesting things I see happening in the industry based off of coming away from the conferences and having conversations with a lot of parks is what is happening with the merging of camping and glamping and just redefining some of that terminology, because you still have so many campgrounds and even campers that use the term glamping to mean they're staying in an RV. And Scott and I have even talked about this in the past. It's kind of interesting because the language has evolved, but not all together. Everybody's not on the same page. So I'm having a good time watching that. That was my big takeaway.
I just want to welcome Mike back. Mike, like, I introduced the show, and I was like, "We're gonna have a clone of Brian," and you were like, you disconnected immediately.
Well, technology issues.
He had to get his Santa hat on.
To be clear, like, one of me is very scary, so I understood, and I wouldn't have been upset. Like, two of me is world-ending, probably. But
I'd say ask Scott. You were talking about some data and reports. We send out a market trends report to all of our park partners and things of that sort. And then, granted, we're just one sample size, so it's not the full industry, but a decent sample size. And Sandy, you're coming off of there, thinking about the merging of kind of glamping and things of that sort coming into this space. A lot of the data that we have are showing is really the largest decline has been in the glamping space. Scott, I don't know if you're seeing kind of similar things in terms of occupancy numbers with the data that you're running in terms of that space itself is still growing, but in terms of where that's from, really October and on, in terms of occupancy, overall, to some extent, year over year is declining a little bit. I think that's to be expected. Rev Pass is up. ADRs are up for most parks. But have you seen some of that in some of the trends in the reports that you're looking at? I mean, we're looking at, I don't know, maybe 2,400 park sample size, but obviously it's a different trend, different market report from what you guys are probably seeing.
What we're seeing is the summer peak season numbers were down. And I think overall you're going to see a leveling off a bit, but the fall was good, especially October. Anecdotally, at least, we've heard that the October figures and even into November were pretty strong. So it kind of seems like there was a little bit of a shift this year. The bad weather, especially like here in the Northeast, we had a really bad June. It rained all but 4 days.
And it was hot in a lot of places too, really hot.
And people were changing up their views a little bit on their accommodations and what they want. I think in the glamping sector too, just the proliferation of the smaller glamping provider too that may not even hit the radar. I mean, I've seen some of the reports, and I know there's two glamping providers in the area I live that don't make it to the list. Yep. So, and I just actually spoke with one of them last week. I did an interview with them, and they just doubled their capacity. They've been so busy, but their busy time again was this fall. Anyway,
okay.
Yep.
Yeah, I was having an interesting conversation too with some in my Park East where some of them are open year round, but they see a downturn in the wintertime because people choose to do more glamping, which tends to be more indoor than RV camping. And so they were wondering if that was actually adding to some of the the increase in what they were, the decrease in some of their units being rented and the increase in people going to other locations?
I think this is honestly like, and I've talked to so many different people, right? From small to large to big over the last year and longer. I think it really just is market specific, accommodation specific, how you're marketing, what's setting you apart. We've talked about the experiential aspect of it, right? I think the reason that none of us can pin it down is because it literally is park by park, state by state, month by month. And I think the big difference is that there's just not as many people camping. There's still a lot, right? Like the industry's fine. But I think that thinning of the herd even slightly is causing people to realize that we just can't put up a campground like Field of Dreams and they'll come. And so I think that's why we're having trouble tracking down exactly what's happening in a pattern. But
Well,
the data guy.
Yeah, I think the market's normalizing, more than anything else. I think, if you look at like, as Casey had mentioned, the numbers that they put out, that's probably the best indicator because it's a national indicator, right? And that has a mix of parks, small, large, national park, transient, long-term. And so, that I think is an overall health indicator. And I think, if you look at a majority of the parks, throughout the U.S., they're hitting their down season, right? Where parks in the Southwest and the South and the Southeast, they're hitting their busy season, right? So, without regional data, it's harder to say, but it's going to be regionalized. But I think the best overall indicator is an aggregated number, if you will. So, it seems. Definitely, we've seen pickup in pace in Q4 for sure, but as almost in alignment with Campspot's, we're driving occupancy at expense of a little bit of rate, just to make sure you capture the business. There's still the concerns about the gas and the economy, but I think the national indicators is helpful.
I don't have anything to dispute that, but again, Scott might. Like Scott's the data guy. Like I just speculate wildly and say whatever comes out of my mouth, and then Scott's here to be like, "No, Brian, you're wrong."
No, my view, it's very in line with what you're saying. It's, we've seen some fluctuations. The localized stuff is obvious. I was at this outdoor economy summit here in Maine last week, and I spoke to some operators, both of campgrounds and glamping parks. And the campground operators were kind of mirroring what I had spoken of earlier about the later in the season, that one person said that they closed too early, that they had all these people still wanting to show up. Here in Maine, some places close in September.
Yeah.
And the other park decided to stay open later with just a skeleton crew, and he said they were full up, until the day they closed. So it is localized. It definitely is localized. There were some things happen here that are, again, the weather, I'll go back to that, helped. But we did see in our research that we tracked throughout this last year that the guests themselves were delaying their trips. The crowding of the previous year, even if they didn't experience it this year, it was still in their minds, and they were still projecting out. So what we saw is people delaying trips and shortening the booking window. Yep. Because they were waiting to see what would happen, because they didn't want to experience that again.
Yeah, we're definitely seeing, a rise in last minute bookings compared to even, years past where, people are, I'm sure there's a combination of inventory being available, later and being able to do that as opposed to previous years. But then I think in general, yeah, I mean, things like obviously are so relevant based on weather and just based on economy and things of that sort, as far as what can drive those things. All of a sudden you see, a push for nice weather for a week and you didn't expect it. All of a sudden that entire area is, has a huge shift. Whereas if, a place that's getting a lot of snow early or whatnot, it's going to obviously affect it. But definitely overall, like nationwide throughout all that, this year was definitely up significantly in terms of what you kind of consider like a last minute booking. As opposed to even, a couple of years past, even in those premium times, when the, occupancy was going up significantly, just seeing some more of that, which I think is also a good thing too, right? I mean, I think if people's perception of camping is it has to be this well thought out, well in advance planned activity, you're hurting them. It hurts the market, right? I mean, I think, you need to be sporadic. I mean, I don't plan anything out, hardly anything, that for vacation standpoint, unless it's probably international, more than, I don't know, maybe a couple of months. And so the traveler, like that's me, that's the way I do most of my stuff. And so if I'm not able to use some of the camping experience kind of last minute, whether it's just staying in a cabin or staying in a glamping unit, I'd have to default to a hotel, right? And so I think there's some good into seeing that people are willing to kind of do those last minute things, because that's an important piece of the industry overall, in my opinion.
Yeah.
To reflect on that, based on what Mike said too, the kind of the resetting to the pre 2020. That's we've been doing this camping research for quite a while, and we looked this up recently that in like 2009, about a third of campers took at least one trip where they didn't make an advance reservation, spontaneous. Last year, we were under 10%. So, and we saw the decline. So it was real at least from our end, from the survey perspective. But
why do you think that was, though? Do you have any data that shows why that changed?
People love the overcrowding, just the all the people out there. It was the people feeling the need. They were booking way in advance, a year in advance. Some people are booking 3 years in advance. They're looking.
I think also the ability to book in advance or to be able to book online. I mean, for a lot of parks that don't take online reservations or haven't in the past. I mean, again, this isn't the Campspot ploy, I promise. But like, in terms of that, I mean, the fact that you can go on your phone and you could book something on your phone on the way somewhere based on availability and choose where you're going to stay. I mean, that's probably a pretty relevant piece of that, is being able to conveniently book. And because there's a lot of campgrounds that still we've seen over the last 4 or 5 years that, we'll speak to that. Hey, we have a lot of just, off the street traffic that comes in, and we kind of want to have space for them. We don't want all of our sites to be available to be booked online, because we have a lot of people that just kind of come through. And of course, in my mind, I'm going, why would you take the guaranteed booking as opposed to leaving space? But there was that type of traveler that they wanted to, accommodate to some extent, because they wanted that, that this to be a place where, hey, I know I could just stop off and go. So it'll be interesting to see how that either continues or plays.
Yeah.
To your point, Casey, we've been talking about training our customers because, Scott, that same information you had from 2009, the demographic, the customer now is completely different, right? Mm-hmm. Technology has changed, those millions and millions of new campers. And so, we've had discussions like, those old highway signs or a billboard, is that even relevant anymore? Like who doesn't know before they get on the road where they're staying now? Right. They're planning their trips using their complete online app of, they're mapping out, from their destination from Oregon down to, Arizona, et cetera. And so training the customers, to Casey's point, I don't think it's a bad thing that lead time is shortening, because you want them to know that, hey, let's go out on the road this weekend. And it's okay to do that. Right. Where 2 or 3, 4 years ago, you couldn't find a campsite anywhere because the, campground industry hadn't exploded. All the national parks were full. And so, educating that new segment to our industry is imperative. And so whatever platform they use, it needs to be available, so somebody can book immediately and can search for a campground. And so that's, I think, what's changed considerably.
But how do we consistently educate those people?
I think it's through what we're doing, right? Whether it's, the national organization, or whether it's Go Camping, Arizona.com, or the California Outdoor Hospitality Association, or the individual companies, or Campspot with their marketplace, or, it's the industry as a whole continues to become more and more and more and more savvy. And I mean, Brian, you've known me for a few years now, and I'm still touting eventually, Marriott will buy one of these companies, right? And the distribution will be immediate, in terms of the accessibility, to the industry for everybody. Right now, it's a bit disjointed. Some people go to RV Parky, some people go to Campendium, Easy Share, Campspot Marketplace, whatever it might be. And so for now, it needs to be everybody pushing the effort and all rowing the same way. Eventually, it needs to be, I think, more focused.
One of the things that we've seen, and this is I can't quantify this yet. We will eventually, but is the idea that, and this is through some of the qualitative research we've done recently, talking to campers and RVers in particular, through long form interviews, and this desire has popped up organically to take more spontaneous trips, and that kind of goes back to what we saw pre-pandemic. There's a large segment, especially within the RV sector, who like to just get on the road and say, I'm going to go to Yellowstone and just stop wherever along the way. That desire still exists. That it's a somewhat older, it's more prevalent with a slightly older demographic, but that kind of, freedom of the road, as they say, to go out there and have that kind of experience again. It's a little nostalgic as well. So I wouldn't be surprised to see a little bit more of that pop up this year, of people wanting to do that. I do feel like, you mentioned Campendium, for example, where people can find, dispersed camping sites and stuff like that via those avenues. That allows for that more spontaneous experience as well.
I do think too that during COVID, we changed some of the ways that we operated because of the demand. So we made our cancellation policies tighter. We made our deposit policies bigger because and so those things changed. And so now what we've got occupancy, but we've still got those two policies in place that I think are actually working against it. And so one of my recommendations to parks is don't lower your rate. I mean, you've achieved that now. That's what the guest knows. Change your cancellation policy or something like that first, because a lot of people, they do want to take that last minute trip, or they want to plan it, but because of the economy or whatever the other reasons are, they're not willing to book 6 months in advance because the cancellation policy is so tight or the deposit is so high. And so, and education wise, these are things that parks can use to market to their already existing customers, to say, hey, come and see us. We're offering you a reduced deposit rate and better cancellation policies, to begin, educating people, because that's really what they think still. They think we have high demand, high occupancy, and they're going to have to make these plans so far in advance and risk so much that they're not even attempting to do.
Yeah, that's a good point, because we've noticed two things kind of on that. One was we did a feature set with called Sensible Weather, for like a weather guarantee, and for the parks that have kind of opted into that, you can spend a little bit of money, and if it rains a certain amount, you get your money back. And it's pretty wild, the cancellation rate, how much that's lowered for the people that have, adopted the weather guarantee aspect of it. So people will still go camping, even if it's supposed to be a crappy weather, because they think, well, if it does rain the entire time, I'm going to get some of my money back. And that was really the goal with that, was to get people used to saying weather isn't guaranteed, right? But the fact that it isn't guaranteed shouldn't affect you canceling your trip last minute. Go, and a lot of times it ends up being 60 and sunny or 70 and sunny, and you wouldn't cancel for no reason. And I think the other thing that, as far as what we can do with our part in this, in terms of help to curb cancellations with a space that is somewhat dependent on weather sometimes, is, adding a thing called, we use like a thing called camp credit. And I don't know, Mike, if you use that or not, but we've had some good success with that, where you, instead of refunding them or not refunding them because you have a really, severe, or I shouldn't say severe, but you have a strict cancellation policy, you can give them their money back, but you give it back to them in the form of a credit at the park. And so for some people that works, right? If they're from the area, hey, I'm going to give you 100% of your money back, but it's just going to be used here at the campground, as opposed to, a 50% cancellation fee and putting the other 50% back on their card. This is kind of open up some ways to say, again, you want to lower cancellation, but you also want people thinking that they can book last minute with availability.
Yep. And I completely agree with Sandy. Our cancellation policies are considerably more flexible than most everyone else, intentionally, right? We want to be easy to do business with, and we don't want people to be scared, that they, if they book 6 months out, they're screwed, right? And we want them to have flexibility. So I'm fully aligned with Sandy and what she's saying. I think, parks, until the demand shows you that you can, you got to, flex your business model a little bit to make sure that you're adjusting to what the demand says.
Well, and I will say this too, right? Let's look at this from the owner's perspective. And there are a lot of owners who do this because they are also scared and uncertain about the future, right? They put these policies in place. Again, everybody's opinion is different. I'm kind of agreeing with you, Mike, and Sandy too. But they put these policies in place because they're worried that something could change in 6 months, or the economy could be bad, or and they don't know how to recoup that stuff even 2 months out, right? Because they don't know all the marketing. They don't know how to get people on social media. They don't know how to run Google ads. They don't know how to optimize their SEO. And so they're uncertain of, if something shifts, how do I gain that back? And so they need or want, probably mostly need, more of that security than people who run larger, efficient, right? Or who know all the latest marketing tactics or whatever. Is that fair? Does that make sense where I'm trying to go with that? Or
Speculation, I guess, but sure.
Well, sure. Yeah, I'm not trying to defend the policies or say that, again, I agree with you. I think the cancellation policy should be more flexible. But I think that, again, we're circling back to education, right? They're both for the consumer and for the owner. There are ways that you can do this while still protecting yourself. And there are ways that you can get that customer back if they were to cancel while still being flexible.
It sounds like an AI blog to me.
Maybe. I'll get that done.
You will, or AI will?
Well, I'll use AI to do it.
There you
go. I'm sure we have a topic. Have you searched our blog, Mike? I'm sure you have a topic. Or we have a topic on that somewhere on our blog. But Shara reminded me in the back end that I need to thank our sponsor, Fireside Accounting, which is a wonderful partner we've had since, I think, the beginning of the show. Well, maybe not the beginning, but at least last year. So they're a great accounting firm located in Colorado. Lindsay Foods runs them. And there's a huge value, as I'm sure everybody on this show will advocate for, to having somebody do your accounting who knows the industry, who knows the numbers, who knows all the deductions you can take, who knows the kind of ins and outs of every way you can take advantage of all those things in a legal way, right? Of course. But I think there's a huge advantage to that. And Lindsay and her team do a great job, and we're super grateful for their sponsorship of the show. So if you're looking for somebody like that, we're just around the corner from tax season, guys, which is the best time of year for everybody. We're all looking forward to that. But you'll be looking forward to it more if you have somebody like Lindsay on your team. So check out Fireside Accounting. That's my off-the-cuff pitch. But I do really believe they're a great company. So, all right, where were we? Sorry.
I don't know. We might be on to the next subject. What's the next subject?
I mean, I'd like to talk, I feel like we're having a good conversation about data here. So I want to give Casey, you and I have talked about this briefly, trying to get Michael on the show, right? And we certainly still will try to do that. But Shara, who's in the background, is an excellent podcast booker. We're booked till February or March or April or something crazy like that.
You tried, and you said that you're 6 months out or something. So
yeah. So I don't understand how she does such a good job, but I'm grateful for her. But so can we briefly talk about some of the findings from there, or do you just want to save that for Michael?
Well, no, I mean, I think in theory, again, when you look at, honestly, Mike Harrison is going to be as good of a knowledge for something like that coming from the hotel space. But I think in general, a lot of the way that you look at hotel inventory and the way that books up, a lot of that is based on the corporate traveler, right? I mean, that's a significant portion of the way that hotels book their inventory is through corporate travel. And
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but has that shifted now, though, with a decline in business travel because of COVID? I know it's recovered some, but
I think maybe it's shifted, but it's still the vast majority. I mean, even from when I was traveling a lot for my previous job, I was a Marriott Rewards person, and I'm still a Marriott Rewards person, and I'm not traveling as much for my job anymore, but I'm still somewhat loyal to that kind of what stemmed from the business travel at some point. And so that's just such a big part, I think, of hotel travel, or what hotels rely on, and offer different rates, significantly different rates for that corporate traveler as opposed to, a standard traveler. Whereas every traveler in the camping space, they're looking at typically the same pricing, regardless, of different situations or whatnot. So just a different mindset of who that audience is, even though the same type of person is going to camp and they're going to stay at a hotel. The way that you look at inventory and how you how you push that out is kind of completely different, because it's almost 100% leisure in the camping space. In hotel space, it may be less than 50% is actual leisure, and the rest of it is some sort of business. Now, I don't know, Mike, if coming from your space, I mean, I don't know if those numbers line up with what, but
yeah, I think they're two very different industries. However, people try, Michael did that white page on, how's the hotel and the RV
That's
industry.
what we're talking about. Yeah, that's what we're talking about.
Yeah, similar and different. And he did a great job. And I think, there are a lot of differences and there are a lot of similarities. I mean, our entire management team for our management company comes from the hotel business, right? And I think it gives us an edge because, we're 25 years ahead of the RV industry in technology and revenue management and sales and marketing and digital and brand standards, et cetera. But at the same time,
campground industry, Mike, most of the campground industry.
Most of the campground industry. I'm so sorry. My apologies for offense. My arrogant hotel self. But the outdoor hospitality, I think, is far more evolved in terms of the hospitality aspect. What the hotel industry used to be, 30, 40 years ago, the personal touch, the experience, the experiential hospitality. And so, as more and more of the RV and campground and glamping adopt, some of the hotel hospitality, edges, I think there's really huge opportunity. I'm very excited about the space. And to answer your question, I think the biggest difference that we're finding is it's not 100% leisure, Casey. If you think about the hotels, there are corporate, people classify them. There's a corporate hotel, a group hotel, a convention hotel, a transient hotel, depending on where you are, right? City center, or if you're urban, et cetera. And I think the campgrounds are very similar, right? If you look at the campground in Florida, that isn't necessarily 100% transient. It's probably 80% annual, right? People have park models, they put their rigs there, and it's very, very minor transient. Like, we have 3 different properties in Arizona, and the mix on all 3 are completely different based on where they are and what we offer. And I think it's a good discussion, because what we found in the industry is that a lot of people and a lot of the management companies approach it from one size fits all. Right. And it's not, your mix is going to be different, and your amenity set and your delivery and your service and your approach has to be different at each one. And, there's one property we have where, we're going back old school and, doing some of the contract business, construction workers, traveling nurses, that kind of stuff, to build occupancy, if you will. So I think it really depends, kind of on the market and property specific that you're in for what your mix is going to be, so to speak. And I think, not trying to plug Campspot, but, the signals report that you guys have for the CompSet data is very, very helpful, in indicating, are you right or wrong? Are you leaving money on the table, or are you maximizing? How are you compared to the CompSet and your ancillary per spend? Is your mix right? Compared to the CompSet, is your rate and your occupancy right? And so those are all good indicators to tell you, are you making the right revenue decisions? I could go on forever on data analytics, as you all know. So I'll pause there.
I think here we talk about, right, some of the unknowns for the owners. We don't want to go back to cancellation policies, but that's some of the unknowns, is they don't know where to get that data, or if they do have it through a Campspot or a New Book or a whatever, right? They don't know how to understand it like you do, Mike, or like some of us do. And so I think there needs to be greater education around how to, and we had these conversations at some of the conferences too, is how do I get that data to park owners in a way that they can consume it easily, instead of learning to understand how to navigate Google Analytics or Campspot Analytics or whatever data tool that they're looking at, right? And all of us certainly who have experience with Google Analytics say that it's easy. Casey will tell you Campspot's easy. Mike will tell you Campspot's easy. But like, for when you're coming at it from a brand new perspective and you have no idea what any of these numbers are, you've never looked at them before, you've never used this platform before, I think that's the unlock to really educate some of these campground owners to make better informed decisions based on their data, is how do we get it to them in a way that they can.
Yeah. Well, I think, and I had shared this, with some of the OHI people. I think a considerable change in the educational sessions at all of these conferences, whether they're the state or the national, needs to be in data analytics reporting, because that's where the industry is going. And 70% of the people I talk to are coming into this space from multifamily, hospitality, and they're all saying the same thing, which is what I said to Casey, I think 3.5 years ago. There's no star report. Like, how do you tell I'm not going to say I take credit for the signals report, but yammering, we need data, right? And so they're finding the same thing. And so I think the more we get the information out and we share with, owners, managers, and so that there's a common semantic, of what the right indicators are, but that's not coming in the next 2 months. That's probably not in the next year, right? It'll probably take a couple of years to get to that point where there is a common 1 or 2 reports, just like the Star Report in the hotel industry. It wasn't always the Star Report, right? I mean, that's what it's evolved to. So there's going to have to be that same thing in the RV industry where people can pull out their report and say, hey, what does X say? And it will just become part of what the culture is, but there has to be that education through, I think, the conferences and through webinars, and, people who don't learn will be left behind. It's going to be on them.
Well, yeah, and that's ultimately the harsh truth, right? That, like, I believe that too, but I also feel like it's maybe not my responsibility, but my want and desire to try to be as many people as I can.
That's why we're all on this call. We don't get paid for this stuff, Brian. I'm not a paid sponsor. Does Casey get paid?
We forgot.
Casey gets paid.
I have to send Scott $1,000 a week to make him do it.
No, but you're right. We are all aligned that our mission is to serve and to educate. That's why we do all these things. So we're in the same place. But you can lead a horse to water so much, and they've also got to take the step on their own.
Yeah, I mean it's very true. I mean not to paint any type of negative picture on it, but I mean you have the tools, a lot of the tools that are there, and I mean it's one of our big missions this year for the end of the year and through Q1 is helping the parks, understand those tools and trying to automate as much of that to make it part of the daily or weekly or even monthly or even quarterly process to just look at some of these things that are tools that are there for you to help benefit the park or your organization or the group. And it starts there, right? You get enough people looking at that, then that's how you continue to evolve it. If you have enough people looking at it and say, okay, now what's the next step? What's the evolution in this to keep providing? Because again, it's all anonymized data, but it's data specifically for this space. And so I think that's what's relevant to keep pushing the industry forward. I mean, there's a reason why the hotels, to some extent, kind of said, hey, there's a common good here, right? There's a common good for all of us to understand, where we all are in some capacity. And then there's, but there's also a big difference though. Campgrounds are so different than a king bed or 2 queens, all within a city block and all above a 3-star, right? There's so much variation from campground to campground and the amenities there. So there's that element in there that's super relevant, to keep in mind.
I think this is already, and I want to hear your thoughts on this stuff, but I think this can already be solved, right? And I think the only limitation here is, and I don't want to be like I'm the AI guy, right? With egotistical, like but like I think it's literally my time, like my available time, and I the way I see it in my head, and certainly there's going to always be a need for in-depth research reports for the people who dive into the analytics and things, right? But in my mind, it needs to be communicated in an easy, condensable, like all these guys are busy. So in the morning, I don't know if you guys remember when Alexa first came out, and I hate Alexa, but when it first came out, there was a really cool skill you could program with some of the news channels on there where you could favorite them in the app. And then in the morning, it would read you your custom news from the channels that you liked. Does anyone remember that? Anybody ever use that?
I think I remember something. I never used it, but
it was sort of useful, but then it would go on for like 3 to 5 minutes, and it wasn't like it was customized to your network, but not really the news you wanted. Anyway, whatever. But that's the idea, right? I think eventually there needs to be something where I can build some kind of a data pool that pulls from just Campspot's API because they're on the call, right? Or from Mike's perspective, from all the data and analytics we have from his Facebook page or from Google Analytics or for whatever. And in the morning, you can literally say, give me my morning brief. And it will pull all that data that happened since the last time you pulled it, run it through AI and say, here is your brief of what has happened and what you need to know for today. Here's how many people are checking in. Here's how many. That's the answer. And I think it can be done now if we had enough resources to do it.
Yeah, I mean, depending on what your view is, if you want like if you want Arnold Schwarzenegger reading it to them in AI with that voice or something. But we have
it's totally
daily manager report that does tell you all that. How many arrivals you have today, how many you have tomorrow, how many check-ins, how many checkouts.
What would Casey, just curious, what would that sound like in Arnold's voice?
I thought about going down that road, and I was like,
Get down! You want 30 arrivals today! Get down!
That's a pretty good impression. I like that.
That was pretty good.
Can you talk that way the rest of the show?
I think that would.
I send you like the $1,000 I was going to send Scott. I'll send you.
Yeah.
Oh man, I was ready to unveil my Arnold. So,
Ryan, I don't think we can do that today because you don't have all the data. You don't.
True.
Yeah.
Well,
so
I do have APIs. Like you're right though, because I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, Casey, but I think most reservation systems APIs, including Campspot, are primarily intended to do booking through, not pull reports through, right?
I mean, to some extent, a combination of both. Like
the
analytics itself, you could point. I mean, if you created something, any park, of course, they choose this. They could point any data set from analytics into any program, and you can point it there automatically. So any report or custom report that you want, hypothetically, you can build in Campspot Analytics, and you can point it and schedule it to get sent to whatever file format or whatever program you want that feeding into. So I mean,
could I pull it in real time? Right?
Yeah, and so real time, if you wanted to run it, hourly, you could schedule it to run hourly or every 15 minutes, I guess, if you really want.
So then the data's available, right? It's just
it's available. It's not available from everybody you'd need it from available. Right. So
who else? Okay, so let's hypothetically, we've got the reservation system, we've got all the marketing analytics and tools. What else? Who else do we need it from?
You're saying need it on a per park basis. You're not saying as an industry. You're saying I want to do this.
Saying on a per park basis.
And so you'd have to, let's say you pulled the market of Arizona, right? I don't know how many parks are in Arizona. If it's 500, you'd need 500 parks, or even if it's 400, to say yes.
No, please. I'm not talking about a star report. I'm talking about a briefing on today's campground stuff.
He's saying for your park, for Coachella.
What I need to know is.
Yeah, I mean, I get that through Campspot. Like I can subscribe to a report.
Of course, but that's not easy. That's easy for you, Mike, but that's not easy for most of your GMs and most of the staff at all these parks around the United States. That's easy for me. It's easy for Casey. It's probably easy for Scott. But that's what I'm saying.
That's part of our, that's part of what our due diligence needs to be, is to prevent you from getting another side project on AI and us just to do things right and get them educated.
No, because I think you're doing them right. I'm not saying that. I think there's two use cases. There's how you have it done, which is wonderful and great, right? And needs to continue to evolve. And if you need a deep dive, you should be able to continue to go in and pull that data. I'm talking about the people who are not as tech savvy as we are, or even if they are, right? Like if you can, then you can ask follow-up questions to it that pulls real time from the Campspot data. I think it's just the same way as we have a blog, we have a podcast, we have social media, we have this show, we have whatever, and not just us, but people in general consume things in different ways. Some like audio, some like video, some like reading. We need to make that data available to them in multiple ways.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry if it came across as I was criticizing anybody. I definitely wasn't. So
I'm offended, but no, I'm not at all. No, I mean, I think you're right. I mean, like that's a huge thing for us to, that we're focused on right now is, how do you simplify things that aren't always necessarily that simple? How do you get parks looking at the things that you think they should be looking at? But then, to be honest, there's also the layer of, if everyone was looking at the same information, how much more of an advantage of there. I mean, Mike is unique in this space where he will come on to shows like this and he'll go into seminars and he will gladly speak to what's working for his park and his portfolio, confident in what the execution that they do that's either different or confident in his execution in general, or he's not trying to hold the secret sauce to some extent. But I think a lot of people to some extent would. Right? They say, I don't want to tell everyone what our trade secrets are because I'm competing with this, and this, and I want to hold that near and dear to the heart. And so, I mean, a good example of this, we've had a lot of parks that have said, hey, I'm not, I don't want our neighbor on Campspot because we're getting so many bookings from the marketplace. I don't want them listed on there, because it's an advantage for us. And so those are like, little nuances but I get that. I totally understand that. Like that, if you think you're getting a competitive advantage with something, what's the, why are you singing it from the hilltops? Like I said, I think that's where there's, I'm not tooting his horn here, but there's a ton of, I guess I am, like with Mike sharing some industry trade secrets openly is a big value to this space, because he's taking what's really working really well for some beautiful properties, and he's sharing some of that information to help push the industry forward, not out of fear, but out of saying, hey, if I can broaden the audience and camping in general, it's going to help me, but it's also going to help everyone else. And the willingness to share that is super relevant.
First, props to sliding into the Campspot marketplace thing. That was really good. Like, if you have a competitive advantage like Fireside Accounting, then you definitely
there's truth to that.
Right? So that's our.
There's absolutely.
I know there's truth to it. It was just really nice.
I had to give a
nice,
specific example that I knew off the top of my head.
Okay.
I have 4 notes here that I'm trying to make sure.
All right, well, I got another mention.
I'm gonna start going like that. I'm gonna start.
It was a poor example. What's something else I could come up with?
It wasn't a poor example. It was good. I'm just saying. It was nice. It was suave.
It was subtle until Brian pointed it out that it wasn't subtle.
No, that's not.
Thanks.
I had to take advantage of it for Fireside Accounting. See, I got another one in. Scott, what do you think of all this stuff? You've been a little quiet over there, soaking it up.
Oh no, I'm taking it all in. To me, it's a great conversation. It's not. Just from my perspective, the whole issue with data, it's like, part of me feels like it's incumbent upon us as people who work in the industry, as industry experts, to try and find, to make the information more digestible, whatever it is. It's a challenge. Believe me, I've been doing it for more years than I care to admit. And it's like, it's always that challenge. And I find the difference from person to person who I work with. Like, one thing I will work with someone, they're like, this is fantastic, I totally get it. And then someone else will be like, huh, this is not, I go, I have no idea what you're talking about. So it's our ongoing challenge. But I think that it's a good, I also feel that the market is way more sophisticated than it used to be in terms of understanding information. We just have to pull them along a little bit more, again, and try to do that. I mean, how much effort do we put in? For me, a lot, because that's my job. But if you're, it depends what you're providing and how. But as I'll use an example with my biggest sponsor, KOA. When we first did their campground level surveys many years ago, 2003, we started it. And the first convention, each campground got their own report. And then I had the table set up, and there was a line of, like, I don't know, every franchise wanting to know what it meant. Then the next year, the line was just as long so that they could tell me how wrong I was. And then the third year, it was, what do we do? What do we do with this? And then after that, the questions were more, they focused them internally. And so it was, you could see the learning process. It just took taking that first step and putting it out there and getting people to start using it and understanding it.
And I think that's part of pulling them along, right? Is part of that, not all of that, is making it as easy to consume as possible.
Right.
So, we talked about my 2024 goals. My 2025 goal is to create a hologram of you, Scott, that anyone can summon, like summon Scott, and your hologram will appear, and it can ask questions based on your knowledge. And
right next to it.
Yeah, right next to the checkout, and they'll subscribe to it, and then you'll make a bunch of money, Scott. But
good. That's what we want.
So.
I would think that your goal would have been to create like a 20-year Pappy Van Winkle in 1 year. That would seem to be a better goal for you. But I guess if you want to go,
it's a good idea. But I think it would be in such short supply, it'd probably be $4,000 a pour.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. You got to go create it in a year.
Yeah.
I'd like on a different topic. I mean, not totally different, but kind of, I've just been thinking about, so I'm going to randomly talk about this, is Mike's point and the point that you also have made about the hotel industry. A lot of the research that we do and that we've done in hospitality came from the hotel industry. One of the most groundbreaking studies in the industry was done by Hilton back in the late 80s, early 90s, and it was how they designed their hotel rooms. And it was all based on discrete choice analysis among consumers, among their guests. They designed all their suites. Everything was designed based on this research. And what we did is we learned from that. We brought it over to other sectors, and we've brought that along with us now to the camping world. It's taken a little bit longer, but yeah, there's a lot that can be learned, to kind of build on that theme of learning from the hotel industry. Hilton had a new study out this year on trends in what guests are looking for too. They've always been committed to doing the research. It's good stuff. I'm just throwing that out there as a resource for people to look at and
That's great.
what other people are doing.
I'm interested to see how quickly like the type of learning we need to do shifts. Like for right now, we're talking a lot about catching up to hotels, right? Which is an admirable goal, right? And we know hotels are leaders in a lot of the spaces. I don't know if they're 25 years ahead, Mike. They're certainly ahead for sure. But it's interesting to me with how quickly things are going to shift, in my opinion. Like, does the type of learning or what we're learning, like, is there a place where outdoor hospitality has a chance to leapfrog hotels in other areas?
For
And
sure.
could learn from outdoor hospitality.
I think Mike mentioned it earlier. I mean, I would
Yep.
say leapfrog. I think the experience, the customer experience, and I mean, think about the experience that, I mean, I keep going to this and this, we didn't have a side conversation, but like when I pulled into one of Mike's parks, I wasn't greeted by anybody. I came after hours, but everything was laid out there for me perfectly fine. I knew right where to go. It was all, cleanly, really easy for me to get in. And I was really impressed with necessarily the lack of employees that were necessarily there. But when I did have questions, we wanted to run a pickleball paddle, and we were going to grab some cervezas there. So we went in, and that experience that I had with his manager there was so pleasant. We learned where we're going to go to dinner. We learned, hey, that this paddle is not that great. Let me go in the back and get you one that's like that experience was tenfold to. I think what you get maybe necessarily from in some hotel instances, but
Yep.
I think what the key difference was not only the personnel, but what she was explaining we could do was so much better than what was in a hotel, right? Like, I mean, we're going out to these hot tubs that were out there. I'm looking at the mountains in the background. We're playing pickleball, tells us about the river that's there and the trails that are there. And, oh yeah, there's an e-bike. Like that experience to me is 1,000 times better than any experience I could get in a hotel. So you combine the two of taking back good, providing good customer service and providing that, but then you get to it. You can 10x customer service when the experience there is 10 times better than what you're going to get at a hotel.
Yeah.
Yes. How much of that, and Mike, I want to hear, I know you're going to talk, how much of that is people and top-down training as well?
It's both. I think, it's the outdoor hospitality offers something that's irreplicable.
Right.
A hotel cannot copy a fishing lake in their building. A hotel lobby cannot copy the smell of pine when you wake up in the morning and you step out of your rig. The hotel cannot copy waking up to the birds chirping, and those things, those are irreplicable, right? And I think if you couple that with the people, right, because the hotels have staffing challenges, the RV resorts have staffing challenges. But I will tell you what I have found generally is the outdoor hospitality is a little bit more slow paced and casual. And, your staff tend to live on property. They love where they work. They're passionate about the place that they work. They take pride in where they work. And that isn't necessarily true everywhere, of course. But generally, it's going to be more true. And if you look at reputationally, a lot of the campgrounds, I think, will, if you and this is a guess, and maybe Scott can do a study on this, if you aggregate Google scores of campgrounds versus hotels, they're probably going to be higher. People are more satisfied overall because you're in a more chill environment. And like we were talking, I think, Brian, maybe it was at the last Modern Campground, in a hotel, you get into the elevator and you try and avoid people, you turn away, you don't want to talk to anybody. In an RV park, you walk out on your porch and you're in your boxers and your bathrobe's open, you're drinking your coffee, hey, Bob, hey, John, do you do that in a hotel? Can you imagine two people with their doors open and you're in your boxers with your coffee? I mean, that would never happen. So that is what's irreplicable, right? You cannot copy that.
I don't know that I necessarily want to see Bob with his bathrobe open, but
you haven't seen Bob.
That's true.
It's
Bob
that sense of community you get.
Sculpture.
Yeah.
But at an outdoor, whether it's a campground or glam ground or whatever, it's that sense of community. People talk about that extensively, right?
Yep.
Like you're not just going to knock on the door of the person next to you and say, "Hey, you want to go get a beer?" It's like, whereas when you're camping, like you'll see that people will just be there. You're amongst the people, and that's what a lot of people like about it, that atmosphere, that sense of community that they bring with them. So
right, you have the option to do that, but you don't have to do that.
Correct.
Well, yeah. And there are some people, again, where I think, the industry is evolving too, is, people want a touchless experience, right? Especially the younger generation. They don't necessarily want to talk to anybody at the campground. I want to check in late at night. I want online check-in. I want to walk to my, glamping unit. I want to pull up to my site and I want to do my own thing and check out, right? And so, that's where I think some of the industry is lagging behind, and the PMSs now continue to evolve their offerings to make sure that you can make a seamless check-in experience that can be all, and checkout that can be all digital. So I think there's
the word you're saying, can, is the key, right? Let it be available, but don't force it.
No, 100%. You don't have to. You can do either or. The storage industry has gone that way, right? Which is very cold and sterile, in some of those environments. So you don't want to lose the hospitality aspect, but you want to be able to provide that to the folks that want it, right? And there are other PMSs that did a study about, particular demographics, and what, they prefer. And the digital and the online check-in is absolutely the Gen Z and the millennial version we have to incorporate it at our own peril if we don't.
That's a great point, Mike. I actually like that, because one of the things that we know is check-in is one of those points of friction for guests. And if some of your guests are doing, the touchless, going right to their site, it frees the staff up to deal with
100%.
what can be those backlogs at the front desk, which we know creates problems. So no, I think that solution is something that needs to be adopted sooner rather than later. And then you can provide hospitality to that guest later with your own touch points, create them yourself.
Well, especially if you're not spending time checking them in, your front desk person now has availability to talk to people about pickleball paddles.
Exactly.
Stuff like that.
Yep.
Speaking of pickleball, it's taking over the world.
I'm telling you, Casey, next time we're in person, it's you, me, Kylie, and we got to find a fourth. So
No, I know it's sad that we didn't get to do that. Brian, you ever played pickleball?
Yeah, I played pickleball. I tried to buy nice shoes. I bought the same shoes as the champion pickleballer, and they didn't make me better. They must be broke. I have to switch them out for another pair.
It must be the paddle then. You probably need to upgrade your paddle.
That's probably true. I did not. I was going to buy a nice paddle, and my girlfriend looked at me. She's like,
I'd say if you get out of the campground industry and you want to switch gears, a good industry to be in is in physical therapy.
That's right.
Because of how many people are getting
all the doctors. The orthopedics have seen a rise in. What's the next show? Is it Carvick in February?
Yeah, I think so.
I'm not sure. Yeah, it might be.
All right, so we're gonna have to. Whoever's going, Casey, from you guys, we're gonna have to organize a pickleball game. I'll be there.
Yeah. If we're gonna play pickleball, I'll for sure go. That gives me.
Is it Carvick or is it Kohai?
Which is Kohai?
Is it can it be Carvick anymore? Because it's now Ojai. So is it Kohai?
Oh.
Well, there's still Carvick. We're still AZ Arvik until we change it.
I don't know how you would pronounce that. Azohai? Azohai. That's kind of got a good ring to it.
Well, it's not going to be a Zohai. I can tell you that. We've already had that discussion.
All right, well, that's my vote anyway. So, all right, we got a minute and a half left. I want to hear your guys' final thoughts. But I think my takeaway here is that we just need to take stock of our resources and our information available to us. I think if you do that, then you're going to find out that you have really nice resources like our sponsor, Fireside Accounting, who might recommend that you look at your data from Cairn Consulting and hire an RV park management group like Sierra Hospitality, who will then put you on the Campspot marketplace. And then your neighbor can be jealous of you.
Full circle. That was pretty good.
Yeah.
Almost.
Any final thoughts you guys want to do in our last minute? Say in our last minute.
My only thought would be let's keep an eye on what happens this winter. I just want to see how close we are in the participation in winter camping. I feel like it's strong and it's going to keep growing.
Yeah.
Do you think
we're very, very, very enthused and excited, for the outdoor hospitality industry, both the glamping expansion and the RV parks? We're looking forward to an awesome 2024 and appreciate the opportunity to participate with all you guys at Modern Campground and Fireside Chats. Thank you, as well as, might as well plug insider perks in the marketing too. You can't, we'll have to market our park to be on Campspot in the marketplace, of course. But thank you, everyone. We wish everybody a happy holidays from CRR.
Has anybody taken photos of Bob and put them on your site as a marketing tool with his bathroom open?
Yes, and they're 5-star rating.
I'm just asking. I mean, and then further to go past that, like, what about, does Bob go winter camping with his bathrobe open?
We sell used bathrobes. If anybody's interested.
There's a 100% chance that a Bob AI with a bathrobe at Boxer image is going to be sent to you soon, Mike.
And a cup of coffee. It'll be holding a steaming cup of coffee, standing on a rig porch of the rig. So
beautiful. Any final thoughts, Casey?
No, I think you guys summed everything up well. I'll leave with the thought of Bob and his robe, and wish everyone a great holiday, and well done with the show this year, Brian. It's been really good information, maybe outside of what I just said.
Awesome. Well, appreciate all you guys being here. It wouldn't be what it is without you. So Merry Christmas to everybody. We still have a couple more shows before the end of the year, but last time we're going to have this group together. So thank you guys. Appreciate you. And we will see you early in January. Take care, guys.
Awesome. Thanks everyone.
Bye.
See ya.
For joining us for this episode of MC Fireside Chats with your host, Brian Searl. Have a suggestion for a show idea? Want your campground or company in a future episode? Email us at hello@moderncampground.com. Get your daily dose of news from moderncampground.com. And be sure to join us next week for more insights into the fascinating world of outdoor hospitality.